Hello, my name is Anoa Changa.
The Way with Anoa. The Way with Anoa.
Welcome to Wonder Woman Wednesdays. Holla! The Way with Anoa is now on Wednesday nights. Why? Because no, I'm just joking. Had a little bit of a personal family scheduling crisis on Tuesday nights now. So thankfully, shout out to my good brother, Mike Redwine with the Louisa Project, doesn't mind sharing Wednesday nights with me. I am joined because every Wonder Woman needs, a killer squad. And so I'm joined tonight by a member of that killer squad, Mr. Brandon. Ladies, I don't really know what his relationship status is. He's single, he's dating, I'm not really sure. But he's pretty awesome on the microphone. So thank you for joining me tonight, Brandon.
You're welcome, Anoa. And my relationship status is hoish.
Awful. Also want to give a shout out to the Sisterhood of the Traveling Edge Snatchers. We definitely need to try and do another roundtable. And shout out to Dr. Amina because she's the one that coined Wonder Woman Wednesday. So, got a rep for the squad. Thanks everybody. We are 6 days. We are 6 days from that giant asteroid, from the apocalypse, or just another election day. Shout out to everybody who's getting out there and early voting and stuff. I know I saw some stuff from people earlier today when I posted about it on my Facebook page that early voting has been there are issues. There are issues with early voting. But these are predictable issues with early voting because people had issues with early voting and voting during the primary, right? First, let's just back up for a second. This is the first election, this first presidential election cycle since the gutting of the VRA, the Voters' Rights Act in 2013 by the Supreme Court. Section 5 protections were removed. No racism. We don't need it anymore. Rip that up. Problem solved, right? Wrong. We're seeing in places like North Carolina, we're seeing in places like Florida, we saw in Arizona during the primary. North Carolina is really interesting because that's considered, one of the crucial must-win states for Hillary Clinton, and voter turnout is down in the early voting. But also, the NAACP is actually suing the state of North Carolina for wrongful purging of predominantly Black Democratic voters. And we've seen this issue of purging in Ohio. Shout out to everyone talking about how great Kasich is and Republican governor of Ohio that purged several thousand people from the rolls unjustly. And they last I checked, they were still trying to work out what the resolution would be to get those people properly reinstated so they can actually vote. That's part of the problem with talking about how reasonable certain Republicans are, right? I mean, let's talk about that for a minute too, right? We're seeing this issue. We've seen Donald Trump calling for people to make it difficult, for lack of a better phrasing, to actually engage in voter intimidation and stuff. We're seeing, as we saw in the primary, as we've seen in other election cycles, we've seen predominantly Republican held places creating difficulty for people in the voting process for actually exercising the vote. I was reading an account actually from North Carolina in terms of the primary about a couple, they're people of color. They were talking about how they were forced to spell out their names and all this other stuff. North Carolina is one of those places where you have to show your ID. And it wasn't the fact that they had to show their ID, but it was the fact that they had to do all this extra hoops just to be able to exercise their right to vote. And now we have, Republican Democrat. We do have Republican Democrats though. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump actually saying, to challenge people at the polls, to question them, all types of stuff. And it's highly problematic what is happening right now, but it's also to some extent preventable, or at least it should have been anticipated by the Democratic brass, by Democratic elite, and by many of these organizations whose job it has been to actually protect the vote. If you have time on Tuesday, definitely check out election protection. There are trainings going on, that election protection, the lawyers committee, people are there. This is what they do. So it's great to post on social media to share the information, but make sure you're actually reporting issues that you're having too, right? Because I know people talked about the caliber. We've had machines. They've had it happen here in Georgia. I early voted Sunday. I was in and out in 15 minutes. My daughter went with me. I'm proud to say that I early voted for Jill Stein. Yay. We all know that I have my own reservations about Jill Stein and the Green Party, but I have a clear conscience. I feel absolutely good about my vote. But it was more important for me to vote about the local issues that were on the local and statewide issues that were on my ballot. We are looking at an amendment to the Constitution here in Georgia that would allow our crooked governor to take over and basically state run, to take over schools. It's just all types of stuff. They want to disband or adjust the Judiciary Ethics Commission. It's all types of going on our local and state issues. And that was the most important thing for me on the ballot. And so I absolutely encourage them. I know folks are discouraged. I know folks are disgusted. I know you don't want to be bothered. Regardless of who you're picking in that presidential slot, because I'm never going to tell you who to vote for and how to vote. I shared with you how I voted because that's me. But what I will say is you absolutely need to be paying attention to what's happening on your local and your state ballots, because that's where the majority of the issues that affect our lives, that's where the majority of decisions are being made. So please, shout out to the Alabama Democratic Party, who claims that they're going to actually pull for all their Democrats in it's 8:00 at night, so the next 5 days, right? Good luck with that. I really hope that includes Jesse Smith running in the 3rd congressional district, veteran, proud father, community member, somebody that's worthy of the support of the state party. Not that we need your approval, but if you're going to put some money behind get out the vote efforts, you need to be making sure you're getting one more seat in Congress in the 3rd district. Brandon, what are your thoughts? Because I just went on a roll right there.
No, I agree with everything you said, but I would add that the entire way we do voting in America is meant to suppress the vote. Let's be honest, voting, we talked about this before we came on air, but voting occurs on a work day that's not a national holiday in a country where not everyone is guaranteed days off that they can just suddenly take. A lot of people, the poorest of us, the most vulnerable populations, are, fundamentally given extra burdens as it comes to voting. You have to take extra time off. Or maybe if you can't make it before or after work, if you're working double shifts, whatever might occur prevents you from voting. At the same time, I don't think we can ever talk about voting in America without talking about the disenfranchisement that occurs of our ex-felons. We talk about voter suppression in terms of African Americans in general, in terms of minorities in general, but we have an entire population of people who have been to jail, who are now unable to vote simply by nature of having been to jail. And in a country where so many people are sent to jail for drug-related offenses, non-violent drug-related offenses, although no matter what your offense should be, you should still be allowed to vote. We should have prisoners in jail voting. Let's be honest. You should be allowed to cast your vote from inside the prison, from my opinion. But
yeah, I agree. I was saying to you earlier, I know we talked a lot about how it should be a federal holiday, but it did not even dawn on me because I'm thinking, I said, I know I've had a day off before and I didn't have to use leave. Well, I must have been thinking about the elections when I voted in college and grad school and stuff, because I have to work. And if I want to volunteer, if I want to do election protection or anything like that on Tuesday, I need to take leave, which takes away from I'm gonna share this with y'all because y'all fam. My father is sick right now, and we're dealing with that as a family. And I need to save my leave in case I need to help out my stepmother and my brother and my, in caring for my father right now. And so having to take leave to go volunteer to help protect and ensure democracy is carried out properly. I'm torn right now because it's something I really wanted to do, but at the same time, that's 8 hours that I may need to go sit with my dad. So it's I'm a, that's a first world middle class person issue I'm having right now, right? Because like you were pointing out, Brandon, a lot of people have to take off time for work. I actually have leave that I can take off from work, right? I have paid leave that I can use. You have other people whether they should get the time off, whether state law says they should, there are still employers that will make you go through hoops and harass you and give you trouble if you're not there. And election day, this is a presidential election cycle. This is not going to be all kumbaya, oh, just come in and vote as you please. We already know people are having issues. We've seen tons of issues in the primary. There's no reason to not believe there's going to be issues akin to 2000 and 2004 once again at the polls. I mean, looking at what's going on in Ohio and Florida, and I mean, let's talk about Florida, right? Like, I mean, with the early voting turnout down, and people, I had some people telling me earlier today that they've seen that they are targeting early voters. You know, they meaning Republican operatives, or I mean, the mainstream Republican Party claims that they're not involved in this because there's actually, I don't know if it's a consent decree or there's a previous lawsuit or something that prevents them from interfering in certain areas. But, you know, we have these militia groups saying that they're going to be actively at the polls, challenging people and stuff. You don't have to be pro-Hillary to understand that that's a problem. That's a serious problem. Right? Like this shouldn't even be, the issue of voting rights shouldn't even be a bipartisan, you know, or it shouldn't be a partisan issue rather, right? It shouldn't be, well, you know, you want people to vote. And I understand there's a lot of issues coming out of primary, especially if you're a Bernie Sanders supporter. But here's the problem right now that we talked about for everybody on all sides, right? People are now so concerned because it's such a higher stake with winning the presidency, but this should be a concern across the board. This should be a concern. And thinking about Democrats, there's all this great language about, you know, the right to vote, et cetera, now, because it's an election season. But there has been plenty of time over the past 3 years that this could have and should have been addressed. Like, where's the plan? We're too busy blaming Russia for everything under the sun. Go ahead, Brandon.
Oh no, you're definitely right, and I think that the failure of Congress to, address the gutting of the Voting Rights Act is perhaps the best example of our government's inactivity. And I just want to bridge this to talk about the importance of the presidency as the whole argument about the Supreme Court. We need the Supreme Court to be, 5 Dem, 4 Republican, or whatever that argument is. That's only a legitimate argument because our Congress is just inept. They can get nothing done. In a real functioning American government, the Supreme Court would not be as important as it is right now. But we just can't seem to pass any comprehensive social economic reform through our Congress anymore. So we have an activist Supreme Court now. We're now voting for one branch of government to protect another branch of government because the third branch of government run by Republicans is just completely inactive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Go ahead.
No, that was all I was going to say about that particularly. But I will say that I just to talk about the militia and people not really valuing democracy as, from my opinion, to like people being and within our climate, our political climate, or even our culture in general, being unable to handle a diverse set of opinions respectfully. I may not be a fan of the Republicans or the Democrats, but I'm willing to sit down and have a conversation with them. And I consider their vote to be part of the national conversation. But what we've seen from this electoral cycle, both from the Republican and especially from the Democratic side, that their definition of choice and agency means you're free to choose who we say you should choose. And if you don't choose that person, well, we're going to, bully you. We're going to strip away your vote. We're not going to value your vote. We're going to do all of these subtle mind games to you to make you regret or go this gaslighting. We're going to make you regret making a choice that's not the choice we chose for you already. So it's this sort of appearance of democracy that we're talking about now. People care about your choice as long as you're making the right one based on their interpretation of events.
Right. I think that's absolutely right. And just looking at my timeline today, right? So still kind of on this topic of voting and stuff like that. And like I said, I mean, at this point, I mean, there might be some people who like kind of figured out by Tuesday morning what they're going to do, at some point Tuesday what they're going to do. But I think a lot of folks kind of already know where they stand and what they're going to do. I was talking with a friend earlier, and he was saying the same thing about how he voted for Jill Stein. And these are people I know who are lifelong Dems who are like, I voted for Jill Stein. I have clear conscience about it. I have other friends who are holding their nose and voting for Hillary, and they have a clear conscience about it. I mean, at the end of the day, I just think you need to have a clear conscience whatever you're doing. And but pay attention to what's on your ballots, right? Look at your sample ballots, pay attention to the issues, because that's really, really important. When we're talking about all these issues about We're talking a lot about education. Shout out to the Journey to Justice Alliance. Last week, if you did not catch it, we had Zakia Ansari and Nina Turner and Jesse Smith took part in a conversation about education and social economic issues as a part of our Black Lives Matter a series that we've been working on. That was on Friday night. Definitely check that video out. But there was a lot of conversations talking about education reform, the things that we need in terms of education equity. These are issues that aren't even really being addressed necessarily. Not even necessarily. Hillary has some compact for HBCUs. Whoopee. That doesn't do anything for Black students who are, or even if you're talking about historically Hispanic institutions, that doesn't do anything for any of those students, who would attend actually what we call a PWI, predominantly white institution, but that's a whole nother story. I'm not an HBCU grad, so I get a little salty when we talk about giving schools $25 billion and don't make allotments for other people at other institutions, but whatever. That's neither here nor there, but there isn't a conversation happening about K through 12 that's a meaningful dialogue. And I think when you look at the efforts of Journey to Justice Alliance, hopefully I'll be able to have the executive director, G2 Brown, on, who's actually a mentor from high school, on somewhere down the line. But they're organizing around issues in terms of education equity, school choice, and looking at right now, they're part of with the charter schools, the moratorium that the NAACP issued. They are part of that whole dialogue. And so just thinking about voting though, right? Because, okay, great, presidential candidates, and they're strong and they can do this, whatever. When we're looking at education policy and what needs to happen, I talk about education as a mom, obviously, but as a community member and thinking about the opportunities. There was a good piece earlier that I saw that talked about, I think it was in The Guardian, that talked about vocational opportunities, right? And how vocational opportunities have basically dwindled from our public schools. You're starting to see some of these high schools that have these specialty programs. You can do a part-time, or you can go get your associate's degree while you're in school. You're starting to see some specialty stuff like that starting to happen. But we used to have great vocational opportunities. And even just looking at, union apprenticeship programs, things like that. The policies and initiatives that would address those issues are not going to be done by someone sitting in the Oval Office. That's going to happen at the state and local level. That's going to happen by city councilors putting forth, job bills, education bills, your school board. Or you have your state legislature like we have now, and your governor here in Georgia trying to pass, bills for school takeover. These things absolutely matter. So you have to pay attention to what's going on and be engaged and try to work around those issues. Something that's been interesting with this early voting and just voting in general have been some of the conversations, right? So basically, Barry said today, if you don't know who Barry is, it's President Barack Hussein Obama. Barry, Barry from the block. Barry said today that basically the Black vote is not on lock for Hillary. So all we've heard this whole cycle is that she got that vote on lock. Black people love them some Hillary because she got the hot sauce in her bag and swag. Yeah, but apparently with the voter turn, and like I said, there are reasons why the voter turnout is down, and we can talk about like I said, we talked about some of the Republican obstructionism. There are all different types of reasons, but some of it also could be the fact that the Democrats and the Hillary Clinton and the Clinton's campaign have a whack-tastic ground game. They're really relying heavily on these progressive organizations to do all the legwork, rely on volunteers. How many of you are maybe you unsubscribed? I did it because I like the intel. But if I get one more damn email from Michael Moore or Lizzie Warren or I don't know who, I'm gonna reach to the computer and slap some damn body. Seriously, the desperation, it reeks. It absolutely reeks. And instead of Carr Bear and others talked about this back in August. Shameless plug right now. If you have not seen my latest piece, because I only write every once in a blue moon, need to wait? No, organize now on progressivearmy.com. One thing I highlight, and I credit Carl for this most definitely, is just thinking about how after, and you saw it even happening during the convention, right? We've seen it happening all throughout this cycle with touting the Republicans who are supporting Hillary Clinton. On the one hand, we're talking about how awful the Republicans are because the Republicans are disenfranchising people from the right to vote and engaging in voter suppression. But on the flip side, we're touting these people because they're reasonable. We're holding them up. And when I'm saying we, it's this sarcastic, euphemistic we. We saw coming out of August, I mean, how many commercials? I see so many commercials about Republicans who just have to do the right thing and vote for Hillary Clinton, but these are the same people who have no problem with voter ID laws and other suppressive tactics that have been happening all over the country. And then you're complaining because we're 5 days away, and this is possibly one of the reasons why voting is down in one of your supposedly the blocks you really care about. Now, this to me, and a lot of us have already talked about this. She's not really talking, okay, she got Obama doing that. Shout out to my girl BJ talking about Obama on the Chitlin circuit today. You got Obama talking about how, Black people got to vote against Trump. We got to vote for Hillary to protect his legacy. First he tried to wag the finger at us. Then he started talking to cousin Pookie. Who the hell got a cousin named Pookie? I don't know. I don't know what antiquated television shows you've been watching, but my cousins they don't go by Pookie. I don't know. Apparently today, his newest things are, there's a whole long list of things, including Michelle's garden that we have to protect, and that's why we need to vote for Hillary. My dude, are you serious? Go ahead, Brandon.
I just don't understand why it's everyone else's job except for theirs to make themselves look good. It's like, why is this whole election should be called the decentralization of Hillary Clinton, in the sense that it's everyone else's job and responsibility and moral obligation to make sure that she wins so that Trump does not. But ultimately, they were not as concerned with Trump winning when they were trying to push him to the head of the class. They weren't concerned about Trump winning when they were trying to shore up support for the craziest Republican candidates to make Hillary Clinton seem more reasonable by comparison. And Obama wasn't concerned about his legacy when he was jailing whistleblowers or when he was
He's not worried about his legacy when today he sits down in an interview and says he's going to let things out at the pipeline just continue as they've been going, and maybe we'll figure something out.
This is the first election where there has been this election has had the most transparency of any election in American history, I would say, because of the proliferation of social media, because of the ability of hackers to hack into once private databases and release information to the public. We have never seen an election like this before, but I think we need to be expecting this kind of dynamic to be what elections look like from now on. And Hillary Clinton is playing an old game in a new world. They were unprepared for the realities of the internet age with this electoral cycle. And hopefully this is going to be a harsh wake up for the Democratic Party, that you can't hide anymore. You can't control the narrative the way you used to control. You can't correct the record.
Right.
The record, we have archives now. We have undeletable archives. You can't redact everything anymore. This is now we now live in a world where the internet has made it really, really hard to be corrupt.
You can't delete thousands of tweets. You mean you can't just clear your Twitter page and pretend like you just started Twitter? Okay.
And those things that you said in 1994 or 1996, they come back to haunt you because you can just look it up. And here's the difference between the millennial generation and the generation before Generation X or anyone who came before the millennials. We look things up. We Google things you tell us almost immediately. You can know there's no longer this kind of tacit acceptance of whatever you tell us as being the fact. We are just inherently distrustful of the government and the electoral process in a way that generations before us, Anoa, but the first election I can remember was the election of George W. Bush. That was the first election that I was paying attention to because at the time I was 9 years old, and all I heard, what cemented my opinion of American democracy, was that he cheated and he won despite losing the popular vote. And then I watched for 8 years as that problem was never corrected. And then I watched for another 8 years as that problem was still never corrected. So I would, make the argument that the millennials have an inherent distrust of the system that has never been corrected because the problem was never solved.
I agree with you. My first election was 2000. Voting. I mean, I remember. I mean, I would say the first election that I remember was probably still around like 9, 10 years old, and that would have been a Clinton election. That would have been Clinton's first election, and Ross Perot. Because I remember I had a friend who was voting for Ross Perot in our election at school, and she tried to get me to vote for him too. And being a 10-year-old and not wanting to vote for Clinton because I come from a Black nationalist household, so my family wasn't even supporting him. I voted for Ross Perot too at 10. What did I know? He was funny looking. Got to represent for the different people. But no, seriously. But I first voted as a college student on campus at Ohio State for Gore because we couldn't let George W. get in office. We couldn't do it. I voted in Ohio. It was a big deal. And I just believed so much. And we were so crushed. In 2004, I was just actually, because again, like I said, I took my daughter to vote with me. And my daughter will be able to vote for the first time in the 2020 election. But she went to vote with me. My kids usually go to vote with me. And in 2004, I had my son on my hip and I had my daughter sitting on the floor coloring, and we were still in Ohio and voted for John Kerry that time because we had to get rid of George Bush. And Ohio was the problematic state that year. Florida was in 2000, Ohio was 2004. And yeah, we were in those long lines. I sat in a long line with babies at my feet. But what stands out in my memory more than standing in line to vote against George Bush in 2004, and we see how this strategy did not work, right? This voting against the candidate does not work. It does not work for Democrats. It doesn't work at all. But what stands out more to me was the fact that in 2004, that election in Ohio was when they put the amendment defining marriage between a man and a woman and got rid of civil unions and domestic partnerships. And standing in line, having been in a domestic partnership with the father of my children, I mean, that's how when we were having our daughter, that's how I had health insurance, was we were domestic partners. And just the way they were able to scare people into and prey on the homophobia of people in 2004. And we saw laws like this popping up after that whole time. Getting rid of those things. State and local elections absolutely matter. They directly impact our lives. And standing there talking to people in line, and people weren't even thinking about the fact that, uncle and auntie so-and-so who've been together 25 years in their common law civil union or whatever, that don't count no more because you're voting against it. So it's really interesting. But there were several tweets I saw today that made some really great points. And I like sharing tweets sometimes only because people illustrate things that, and I don't want to steal somebody else's intellectual thunder, right? I mean, shout out to Wendy Muse on Twitter as Muse Wendy. Because going back to Obama was talking about how voters just say it's just not really feeling it, it's just not really there, it's lacking. And she was talking about basically how, well, maybe the problem's the candidate, right? Maybe the problem's the candidate in the party. Like, again, they spent all this time touting all the Republicans, and George W. Bush is voting for her. Both of them, all of the Bushes, the whole damn Bush family's voting for her. Just a few years ago, y'all was talking about how the whole damn Bush family was war criminals. Now we excited because they voted for her. Go ahead, Brandon.
Look, I jump into that. That is the weirdest mentality I have ever seen. This sort of pride that people have taken in being supported by their enemies, right? Yes. And so, from my perspective, so I wouldn't call myself a decent human being, but I walk upright, so I do all right for a human being, for a mammal at least. What I would say is that if I were being supported by someone like, I would take a long, hard look at myself, because I would think, oh my God, what have I done in my life to make me attractive to Henry Kissinger? What have I done in my life to make me an attractive candidate for George W. Bush? And I would have a good long look at my history. But these people take it as a symbol of pride that they have sort of bridged that gap between Republican and Democrat in a way that I find to be kind of gross. And I had a thought today, or maybe a few days ago, that I thought I would share. In 2020, we're going to have the first election where I'm assuming we're going to have the first election, if things keep going the same way they're going now, where there will be people voting, 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 19-year-olds voting, that have never lived in a country not under war, like have never lived in a country that has not been at war. We're going to
My
have a
kid has
generation
grown
of
up. Yeah, my kids have grown up. We've been in perpetual warfare since my daughter was about 2 weeks old.
Yeah,
She was
they will
born
not.
a
They will
couple
have
weeks
never.
before September 11th. Yeah.
They will have never known a America that has not been in perpetual warfare, and that has become the new normal. And if you don't think that's problematic, I would point to the sort of tweets that we've been seeing coming out now, where people talk about, it's ideal that we can't be involved in drone warfare in 8 separate Muslim countries. That is idealistic, because that's the effect that perpetual warfare has on people. It normalizes it. So where you point out that these are gross, these are war crimes, and
Right.
a decent country would be condemning these things, all people can think, well, it's always been like this. And so next election, we will have a group of 18, 20 year olds, give or take,
Mhm.
who, for them, the idea that your country would not be at war would, they can conceptualize, that's what they've grown up under, generally. And
Right.
so the idea of war, or peace rather, let's put it that way, as being a meaningful political talking point, that we won't be at war, will disappear. That's going to start disappearing. Well, it's already disappeared in this electoral cycle. The idea that not being at war, or not wanting to go to war, or not being a war hawk is, like that being a good quality is going to go away. Like the idea that wanting peace is a prerequisite for liberal candidates, and that worries me.
No, I agree. And just there was another. Another quote I had for tonight was from Goddess Chantel. Interesting to see at the Democrats in panic mode over the black vote, all while they fake care about real black issues. So, I mean, like I said, like when you come out of, I mean, the fact that you have the mothers of the movement on the same stage as Bloomberg, Mr. Stop and Frisk is A-OK, Mr. Black Men shouldn't own guns. Like it's such a problem. He's not with the vitriol. He's a former Trump friend up until like maybe 6 months ago, 7 months ago. All these recent people who that always gets me. We talk about how awful Trump has been for the last several decades, and I'm about to get to Trump in a minute. But we talk about how awful Trump has been, but all these people hung out with him up until this election cycle, like up until the primaries, like up until the last winter, up until a year ago, right? Russell Simmons can go on and on about, whatever, but it's like, dude, you hung out with, he wrote the foreword to your damn book. Okay, your credibility is kind of shot. So when you see someone like, Hillary Clinton, who's this great champion of blackness, catering to people who enabled the current environment that we have, right? Because and shameless plugging in, need to wait, organize now. On progressivearmor.com, my latest piece. I talk about how we've seen these people that we're championing as reasonable Republicans have continued to grow and develop this environment that exists that allowed someone like Donald Trump to rise and take over. And it's a two-way street, because Democrats didn't do anything to combat it. And quite honestly, the progressive left has been so fragmented and focused on whatever pet issues that it hasn't really taken race on ahead until it got specifically challenged, in the past few years, particularly around criminal justice reform and Black Lives Matter in particular. So, I mean, we the fact that we're now all like, oh my God, the black vote. Y'all only care about the damn black vote when it's time to win an election. Don't nobody care about growing and creating black political power. And this is something that we need to be focused on as individuals, and not just black political power, but people power in general. This is what we need to be organizing on, instead of hoping that we get asked to the big dance. Have an alternative prom yourself.
Well, I mean, my question,
Go ahead.
I have a question for you. What makes the Republican reasonable? It's like, so like, this seems to be like, I keep seeing this idea, like what makes, like, yeah, I mean, that seems to be the only criteria to make you reasonable now. It's like, if you're reasonable, if you agree with
Kasich is reasonable because he didn't support Donald Trump, even though as the governor of Ohio, he's high up in the Ohio Republican Party. The Ohio Republican Party, I saw a post today, the Ohio Republican Party is most definitely supporting Donald Trump. So you might not be supporting him in your personal capacity, but your local party that you're head of still does. And that says a lot. These people are reasonable because they're voting for her, but they're still supporting down ballot candidates who are antithetical to what we need to be happening on our state and local levels.
Exactly. And see, I guess this is my question. It's like, what makes from, I guess, because I'm just less taken in by rhetoric and, orange skin buffoons. Like, if the policies are the same, what is the difference? I mean, like let's be honest. I understand the normalizing effect but if the difference between Donald Trump and Kasich, or Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, or Donald Trump and Marco Rubio is, that's within spitting distance. That's the next logical step. It's this old saying, the Republican Party has been tailoring a suit for the past 30, 40 years. And I would add that the Democratic Party has been providing the fabric for that suit for the past 40 years. And Donald Trump simply stepped in and saw that it fit, perfectly well. That he was able to fill that suit. And now we have these people, scrambling to place blame on someone else for constructing the suit, as though Donald Trump sprung fully formed from the lake, like Aphrodite. Right. Trump is exactly what we've been working towards as a country for the past Carter, actually. And if this Trump doesn't win, the next Trump is going to win, because we're going to continue to work towards this. Trump losing now would just confirm that the suit that Trump is not finished yet.
Yep, absolutely agree. So moving on a little bit. No, go ahead.
This is the way with Anoa, not the way with Brandon. Yeah,
it's okay. You know what I'm saying? Because it's all good. And if you're loving us now, we'll be back with Ben in 20 minutes. Because it's one of those types of nights. But I think the big thing, that takeaway, we can continue to talk about this, but we really need to stay, focus on what the issues are that we're talking about and calling out. And so, I got pushback, of course. Also, I got a bunch of crazy ass Trump supporters in my time. Anytime, like I get it, y'all don't like her. I don't care for her either. But at the same time, some of y'all are unhinged. Like I got Trump supporters. Your candidate is racist. People are burning down churches in the South in his name. Granted, people were burning down churches before he was a candidate. Let's not get it twisted. This racism, the KKK, the white supremacists, the white nationalists, all of this has been going very strong and heavily ignored by Democrats and Republicans, both sides, and allowed to grow and fester, and no one has done anything. This is homegrown terrorism at its finest, and no one's done anything about it. But now all of a sudden we're so afraid of Donald Trump. But being all real though, this having white Trump supporters tweet me Hillary Clinton super predator videos, dude. Your candidate spent what, $100,000 railroading the Central Park 5, right? Like, y'all don't have a moral high ground to stand on in this argument here. And we need to push back on everybody who's doing it. As a so-called so woke progressive left, we need to stop everybody from doing what they're doing right now, because it's not helpful, and it's not helping us build political agency, political power, or even increasing political education and awareness. And that needs to be one of the things that's a part of our goal in the off cycle, in between now and 2018, when we're looking to flip some more seats. It don't matter whether you went green, because let's not get into it either. Just because you voting for Jill Stein don't mean you're so woke and so better than everybody else, because there is work that needs to be done. And if you're going green and you're part of a third party, whether it's PSL or Worker World Party, I actually would have preferred to vote PSL, not just because Eugene's my new friend, but and I love Gloria LaRiva, but because I really feel like PSL is in more line with me personally, because I like the fact that they're about organizing, educating, and mobilizing people. I mean, yes, it's great to have ballot access, and yes, you do need to be able to influence change and politics and stuff. You do need to be involved in the process, but at the same time, you got to start working with the people and meeting them where they are. Having all these great lofty conversations and stuff is beautiful, but we need to start making sure that we have those organizational bases in place, so that if the Greens can get to that 5%, then what next? I kind of, like I said, I have my own issues, and I've talked about it several times, and we can get pushback if you want to, but seriously, it don't matter who you're voting for. You need to be active and involved in making sure in the off cycle, you know what I'm saying, people, the potential is there. It's great to get the Greens ballot access, but if we don't have candidates to run as Green Party candidates, what did we all do it for? I mean,
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, like it, like we need more there. So we can't get mad at Hillary Clinton supporters and Democrats who get upset about criticism and pushback and questioning. But then if you're voting and supporting the Green Party, you do the same exact thing. Like, it doesn't work that way. You got to look at the big picture. How do we get from point A to point B? How is this going to help us? What are we doing down the line? I mean, if you are a libertarian, I'm tending to speak from what I know, but if you're a libertarian, the same thing. I think libertarians seem to have a little bit of a different situation in terms of structure and stuff. It doesn't seem to be as movement oriented, maybe as left's third parties tend to be. I'm not really sure if that's correct because I don't really know that much, and I'm okay with admitting that. But the voting, and I've talked a lot about it because it's really, to me, I really don't think, people were like, ha ha ha, the blacks don't want to vote for Hillary. I mean, really, I think you do yourself a disservice when you do not vote. Not saying that you have to vote for president. I do believe that it is okay if you want to write somebody else in. That is your prerogative, as long as you are okay with it. But I think to not vote at all, and then we sit there and talk about how they don't mean us any well. Like, if there's stuff going on in your community that you do not like and you did not vote, that is a problem. Voting is not the only answer. It's not the only tool, but it is a tool. And we really do need to be mobilizing, engaging, and leveraging it to our benefit. We talk so much, especially as a Black woman, there's so much hype right now. We got 5 days. They got people having brunches and lunches and phone banking, sister chats, and all types of going on. That's great. Black women we're movers and shakers and we're influencers, but when are we going to use that energy to influence for our betterment versus holding up somebody else? That's the Black vote in general. That's the Latino vote. That's any marquee group vote. Because when you look at, when you look at the LGBT community, you best believe as a whole, that community makes sure that it's leveraging its vote to better it and forward issues. Now, there are issues in there about whether, because that's an amorphous group and it's not a monolith as well. But overall, there's a different strategy versus Black people who are held captive by the Democratic Party, and we just got to vote because our ancestors died. You know what my ancestors died for? My ancestors died for me to be free, okay? Not for me to be beholden to anyone in particular group that likes to bargain away my freedom, my ability to exist, my ability for my kids to exist and thrive at their greatest potential because they want to make sure they appease Republicans who might be reasonable. Go ahead, Brandon.
Well, can I make a comment?
Yeah.
I mean, I think what we're talking about now is that as a country, as a political culture, we need to start making the shift, especially on the left, from being reactive to we both allowing the left to be defined by not the right. So we need to stop letting our Democratic elected officials define themselves simply by not being Republicans, by putting a D by their name, by simply deciding that, I believe that women are sort of people. I believe that Blacks, are sort of people. I don't think that in the streets, but I'm not, super in favor of them because that's what this has become. This has become a country defined by politics, by crisis management, where people are being hoodwinked into voting for the lesser of two evils because I saw a tweet by Sean King today and a bunch of tweets by a bunch of people where it's like 6 days left. You got 6 days left. Oh my God, 6 days left. Counting down basically to doomsday and trying to make you a snap decision. That's the point of this whole thing. The point is to keep the American populace in fear so that you can that you're forced to make a snap reactionary decision instead of and saying, okay, this election is pretty much over. How can I vote in the most strategically to affect the next year? How am I going to?
Oh no, there you go. No, we got you. You were breaking up a little bit, but no, I definitely, I definitely agree. But just going a little bit because we're down to our last 10 minutes, and then you guys stick around because Ben is coming on, and we'll be back on with Ben in a few minutes. Got a new segment, Politics and Grits. Oh yeah. But I just wanted this kind of segue because we're gonna keep having this conversation about voting only because it needs to happen. But we need to start talking about not just talking about the issues, but also how do we actually organize to have more effective strategies around voting, how we vote, what the issues are with voting, how we can address them on the local, because again, this is stuff that has to be addressed on the state and local level as well. You know, the different machines being used, like we have issues with calibration in the machines here in parts of Georgia. I mean, there are issues all over the place. And like Brandon said earlier, these issues have been around for the last 15, 20 years, and they have not been addressed or resolved at all. And we're seeing the same problems continue to happen. Only when people actually demand that the government fix this, that do something, will it actually happen. But we got to be clear on what that is and not just say we want something done. We need to actually be clear on what we want done, how we want it done. Not saying it's going to actually get done exactly what we're saying, but we need to at least put something forward, because we might not like what we get back if you don't give people specifics. I want to quickly talk a little bit about the Trump rape case and why it's not being covered. Oh my God. I'm a nasty woman and I'm so anti-Trump. Nah, like I think we get so you know, shout out to all my nasty women and my bad hombres. That was on purpose. My bad hombre.
No, it's mixtape title. Nasty Women and Bad Hombres.
Yo, that's my daughter said, oh, that sounds like a 90s band that like complains about like how hard it was growing up in the suburbs or something. But you know, my deplorables and my basement dwellers, shout out to my sheeple. Gotta insult everybody, be equal opportunity. But no, seriously, I mean, it's a very good question that's been put forward about why the campaigns, why the Clinton campaign, why the Democrats, why the media. And I know some people have said they haven't really talked about the Trump rape case because the accuser is anonymous. I don't know when it's issues and allegations, has that ever stopped anyone from reporting anything? You know, of this level. I mean, we have a presidential candidate that is being sued for rape. He can't be charged because of the statute of limitations. It happened in 1994. This woman is my age. She was 13 in 1994. And the allegations involve you know, the Democrats and the Republicans' favorite billionaire pedophile, Epstein, captain of the Lolita Express, friend to Trump and Bill Clinton and Prince Andrew, and apparently a whole lot of other very important people, Tony Blair. But what strikes me more so about this conversation, and I hate the fact that the sexual assault allegations on both sides, the rape charges, I hate that it's become so partisan and it's being used as fodder to fight. But I do think we need to have a conversation about the fact that this type of situation is happening with someone who's running for office and the highest office in the land. And again, we can get into, you know, people brought up before about Hillary Clinton and allegations that she was an enabler. And it was a really disturbing exchange earlier today that I saw. There was a woman who's voting for Secretary Clinton, and she was just talking about how she doesn't really care if she was an enabler. And now we're finding out more, you know, because again, Bill Clinton also has been involved with Epstein and going to his little private pleasure island. Epstein did like, I think 12 months or 18 months in jail in Florida, you know, for basically running a sex trade with underage girls. And forcing them to have sex with his famous and powerful political friends. And Bill Clinton has taken trips to this pleasure island, for lack of a better term, before, and left his Secret Service behind. Now, I suspect that not only his connection to Bill Clinton, but also Hillary, even after he was found to have been engaging in this behavior, he was still donating money to the Clinton Foundation. It looks very bad. Optically, it looks very bad that you hang out with pedophiles. It looks very bad that one of your senior staffers is married to a possible pedophile. I mean, you know, when the Wiener scandal first broke, I think it was in 2011, 2012. Part of it was he was involved in communicating with a 17-year-old girl. Among all the women, she was 17 on Twitter. And this was known internally to the campaign. And they weren't the campaign then, though they were her staffers while she was Secretary of State. And now we see there's a 15-year-old girl involved. And there are some allegations that people knew or had reason to know that this type of abuse of power and engaging in activity with underage girls has been known. And my issue is not that I think we need to, you know, run attack ads or anything like that. But the fact that this woman was willing to come forward today until people were harassing her attorney, Lisa Bloom, speaks volumes. I think this type of stuff needs to be bigger than elections. We need to have a conversation about the abuse of power and the way, sex trafficking and these issues permeate across. The fact that prostitutes are the ones who face considerable, criminal persecution. And even if you're an underage prostitute, right, you can be charged with prostitution. Your John may or may not ever get a charge of anything involving statutory rape or anything like that. And the way these types of sex crimes, the way these issues, are sounding like I'm talking about an SVU episode. This is actually like 3 or 4 different SVU episodes put together, right? But there's a real problem in the way this conversation is unfolding, and watching feminists break their necks to defend a woman that has enabled and allowed this environment around her to occur is so highly problematic and detrimental to further fights for equality and justice for girls and women overall, and sexual power and accountability. And it just floors me. Go ahead, Brandon.
At the risk of being, I always feel a little bit self-conscious talking about this topic, especially with what I'm going to say right now. And it's going to be a bit inflammatory, so I warned you about that, but not offensive. I think in the past, with the dominant discourse on rape culture in society and what we see in the media right now, I think and especially the way we turn a blind eye to some sexual assault victims in favor of boosting the voices of other sexual assault victims, we can say something very clear right now. Problem with crime, whether it be sexual assault or any other crime, when it happens to a very specific subpopulation. When we're talking about the upper middle class white college female who's the victim of heteronormative rape, who's the victim of some kind of sexual assault, that a population that we already view as valuable, because the majority of sexual assaults occur to people of color, are non-heteronormative, to males, to the vast majority. We pay attention to the vast minority of rapes because they fit this kind of dominant discourse regarding what sex should, our dominant discourse around sex. I know rape is not necessarily about sex, obviously, but the way we handle it is about sex. And America simply does not have a cogent conversation about rape, because America at its core views that certain populations are deserving of torture, that certain populations exist within our society to be tortured, and that's just the way society functions. So hard time conceptualizing why we should, and also certain parts of our population are allowed to torture other populations. Let's talk about, the first rape culture was the Native Americans and the slaves. And we have yet to have any kind of adequate discourse about all that sexual assault. And Native women are still sexually assaulted at the highest rates of any women in America. Talk about sexual assault and victims of sexual assault. What we're talking about is, how can we expand this conversation? How can we expand our empathy to encompass people who we do not already view as dominant and worthy of protecting? And America doesn't have a problem with valuing white female 18 to 27-year-old upper middle class sexuality. That's what the first movie was about. Birth of a Nation was about the dangers that white women face in terms of rape.
And that's how the KKK was able to spread its messaging, right? When we talk about how Donald Trump is voting against Donald Trump is defeating white supremacy. White supremacy, this is another way white supremacy has infused itself, was birthed into the nation itself. And this is a conversation that we definitely need to continue having. And I would love to have you come back and join me, and I'll try and bring in some of the ladies from the sisterhood as well. So you get to be the only guy in the room with one of my ladies groups. But anyway, that is my first edition of Wonder Woman Wednesday. Thank you so much, Brandon, for joining me. Stick around, everybody. In about 3 minutes, BPD will be on with the Benjamin Dixon Show with more hard-hitting news and commentary, and Brandon and myself will be joining him shortly therewith. Thank you, guys. Good night.
Have a good night, everyone.
The Way with Anoa. Anoa.